This is episode 58 with Paul Sohn.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 58 today, and I'm super excited to be speaking to none other than Paul Sohn. Now, I've been trying to get in touch with Paul, and I finally got around to doing so, and I'm really excited about bringing you guys this episode. In case you haven't heard of him, Paul is a leadership coach, speaker, and author who helps build leaders worth following and organizations that people want to work for. After achieving early success in his own career, Paul started experiencing a quarter-life crisis when he realized that he'd never be able to make the impact he desired at his current job. He decided to quit with no secured position, but just a few days afterwards, he received an offer that allowed him to use his gifts and talents in a more meaningful way. Paul has since pivoted his career to focus attention on empowering 20-somethings to find their true north, which he does via his new organization, Cara, as well as his book, The Quarter Life Calling. Now, in this episode, you're going to learn what is a calling and how Paul discovered his own. Is the quarter life crisis a real thing? How to tell if you're having a quarter life crisis? Why self-awareness is so important? Should you quit your job or start a side gig first? And how to know when it's time to change direction. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/058. But for now, let's go hang out with Paul. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm super excited to be speaking to Paul Sohn. Paul, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been quite a long time in the making, but I'm really excited to be speaking to you. You also really really influential on Twitter, and I think that's where I first came across you. And I think we've actually got quite a lot in common. We're both ENFJs and passionate about sort of the 20-something space and leadership and coaching. I think you've got Korean roots, and I was about to go to Korea last year to go teach English. And both of us both of us quit our jobs with no plan B, which we'll surely get onto later on. But for people that are listening who don't know who you are, why don't you fill us in and tell us a bit about your quarter life story?
Sure. So my name is Paul Sohn. I call myself a 1.5 generation Korean Canadian American. So I grew up in 3 different countries, born in Seoul, South Korea, but also moving back and forth from North America, back to Korea, and to Canada, which is where I went to pursue my studies for my high school and my undergrad. And then for work, I also then moved to the States. And my quarter life story really, as I think about my 20s, I think about just a really ambitious, driven young professional trying to succeed and find my identity through my work, through my performance. I had the opportunity to work for a Fortune 500 company where in my early 20s, I was making nearly 6-figure salary. I was living in a very posh neighborhood in downtown Portland. I was, working with senior leaders who were twice my age and just climbing the corporate ladder. So many ways, many people were seeing that as me pursuing my dream and living my dream. But deep inside, I felt empty. I felt quite restless, in fact, that I didn't really know why I was feeling this way. But through a mentor of mine, I realized that I was actually not living out my calling. And my mentor was saying that, Paul, you have a unique calling in your life. And up until that point, I didn't even know what that meant. I really was just so driven professionally to climb this success and become a vice president at a Fortune 500 company by my end of my 30s. And I thought that was really what life was all about. But I realized that work was just a daily grind, that I didn't really actually get to enjoy it as much as I thought. And that just kind of turned me off and just like went through this hamster wheel where I'm like, why am I doing this? Who am I? And I start to ask all these, fundamental questions in life. And through my mentor and some of the books he recommended, it really helped me to take a pause in my life and to really assess, again, those big questions. And that led me ultimately to discover my calling. And my calling really, I believe, is in raising up the next generation of leaders to really help them live out their God-given identity and calling. So, 2 years ago, in fact, around this time is when actually I quit my job. And as I quit my job, I couldn't pay the rent for the next month. So obviously it was a big deal. So I ended up actually moving into my parents in San Diego, had to make some dramatic changes. And then since then, a lot of things have happened. But long story short, I wrote a book called Quarter Life Calling, Pursuing Your God-Given Purpose in Your 20s. This book got picked up by a publisher, and now it's coming out again, released on April 4th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the time of recording this, it's tomorrow. So I really appreciate you taking the time out when I'm sure you've got a million and other things you're stressing about doing. So how old were you at the time when you quit your job?
I was 28 years old.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm 28 now, so that's pretty cool. And you mentioned a little earlier that, your mentor had said you're not fulfilling your calling and you didn't really know what that meant. Having sort of taken the path that you have now, what do you now understand to be a calling?
Yes. Calling, as I see it, literally is a call, right? I think as I thought about calling, I thought it was just kind of a glorified job, right? I'm called to be a doctor, I'm called to be an artist, I'm called to be a businessman. But as I really learned about the idea and concept of calling, it's literally somebody calling me. And for me, I come from a faith background, and I realized that there's a creator, there's a God who actually calls me for something greater than just simply living for myself, but in actually using my gifts, the passions, and the life story that I have to serve other people. So a calling is not just about making good money and just being able to have a great reputation. That's not bad of itself, but there's something bigger. There's a transcendent purpose behind that. And for me, it's to be able to help other people like me, who was in their 20s, who are just struggling and feeling stuck, feeling like their life is full of U-turns, being able to help them provide direction and clarity around what their life looks like.
Yeah, when I was about to quit my job, there were two videos that kind of pushed me over the edge. And I want to ask you a similar question later on. But those two videos were Steve Jobs' commencement speech and Scott Dinsmore's TED Talk. And in Scott Dinsmore's talk, he spoke about what's that thing you can't not do? And it sounds like that's kind of the same. It's that thing that won't go away. It keeps kind of knocking at your door.
Exactly.
So I'm really excited to be speaking with you, Paul, and having written Quarter Life Calling. But I want to kind of start with something that I've spoken to a few guests about, and that is, why is the quarter life crisis so common nowadays, and is it even a real thing?
Yeah, that's a really big question, because I think when I say the word quarter life crisis, most people are kind of chuckling, are you even serious?
Entitled millennials.
What is that? Yeah, what? A quarter life crisis? They heard of midlife crisis, but quarter life crisis. And usually I'm the one who's trying to convince them, right? But really, I believe that the age that we live in today, right, it's very different from what you see compared to 50 years ago. Let's, for instance, around our parents' generation, or maybe even our grandparents' generation in 1960s. I mean, at that time, you saw all these people who are getting married when they were 20 years old. And now the average age of people who are getting married in the United States is around 29 for men and 27 for women. And it's continuing to go up, right? And I think there's a lot of different reasons why we've seen a big kind of in-between time. A lot of researchers, or they're more thought leaders. They call it the emerging adulthood. It's just this gap that you see. And when you were probably around 20, about 50 years ago, that's when you finished school, because at that time, education was not as much of a factor, and not a lot of people went to school to pursue their undergraduate or postgraduate studies. But today, everybody's going to grad school now. It's almost like a default. If I can't find a job, I need to go back to school, because that's going to save me time, perhaps help me build up the skills so that I'm more employable. You're seeing a lot more 20-somethings today, millennials, who are more disengaged at work compared to any other generation before. So there's a lot of different things happening. You're also seeing so many millennials, 20-somethings who are moving. Studies show that I think it's about 33% of millennials are moving city to city every year. So that's a lot of moving. It's a very mobile generation, right? And you're seeing also social media with technology creating this false sense of kind of instant gratification, and that the grass is greener on the other side, or the fear of missing out. All these are recent phenomena that I believe are causing a quarter life crisis. And it's a real thing. I believe that compared to a midlife crisis, a quarter life crisis is where people are just overwhelmed by all these opportunities and choices in front of them, and they just don't know where to go. It's kind of a analysis by paralysis, whereas the midlife crisis is where they've accomplished some modicum of success in life, and now at that point they're saying, okay, what's next? What's more? Because I feel like I've done everything I can, but I still feel pretty meaningless and unfulfilled at that point.
Yeah, a way that, as you were saying that I was thinking about it, is like a midlife crisis is more like I should have done that thing, whereas a quarter life crisis is like which thing should I do?
Exactly.
There's so many options. So how do we tell if we are having a quarter life crisis?
What do we tell? You mean to the quarter life?
How do we know if we're having one?
Oh, how do we know? Okay, great. Well, I mean, this is something that happens to me quite often. Is I go on Facebook, or I go on Instagram, and I see my news feed, and I see my friends. So I'm 30 years old right now. So I'm seeing my friends starting to get married. They're getting engaged. They're having their babies. They're traveling around the world. And I look at myself and I'm like, okay, Paul, what are you doing with your life? Okay, I'm just starting this new business. I wrote a book, cool, but oh gosh, I feel like I am missing out on some serious stuff right now. And that pressure builds up. I mean, I think it's a very subconscious thing, but the studies show that people who are engaged with more than 6 social media accounts compared to those who use less than 2 social media accounts have 3 times of more likelihood to have depression. Just because of all the comparisons and the transparent world that we're living in. I think a lot of that feeds into kind of the quarter life crisis. So if you're feeling just this FOMO with all the things that's happening in your life and with your social media, probably that's one of the signs that you're feeling like you're going through a quarter life crisis. Also, another aspect of it is vocationally as well. So if you are working at a job and it's a day job that's probably not aligned with your calling and your purpose, but you're feeling pretty stuck because okay, you have to pay the bills. You can't just quit because the thought of just quitting scares you so much. But at the same time, you feel like this is not something you want to do for the next 5-10 years. So a lot of my friends and even myself, I had a point where I really had to think through my options and really have to go through, okay, what do I have to do to live a life that is more aligned with my calling? And there's a lot of fear that also comes with that, whether it's our insecurities or the fear of failure or fear of rejection. But overcoming that, I think, is a really important process of overcoming your quarter life crisis.
So in terms of dealing with the quarter life crisis and all that other stuff we mentioned now, is it as simple as kind of disengaging or setting limits for social media? How do we go about dealing with that?
I think some of those techniques will help, but I think it's more of you need to address the root cause. And I think the root cause ultimately goes back to knowing who you are. What do you believe who you are? Because if you believe this is who you are, this is probably how you'll act, right? And I think a big part of the 20-something generation, one of the things that if you could just do one thing in your 20s is building your self-awareness. I think self-awareness is so important. It's something I emphasize all the time because we're living in a generation where we put on filters, we put on a mask, an image, a facade, wherever we go, even on social media, right? It's all about looking best, looking great. I don't know if you use dating apps, but again, same idea. It's you're showing a part of yourself, and people are judging you based on that. So we are so accustomed to showing not our authentic self, and as a result, it's very confusing for a lot of us to really know who am I? Who am I really? Like, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? And being able to identify those questions earlier on, intentionally, whether it's a mentor or whether it's through a coach or going through different type of assessments, I think that's going to be a big game changer.
Yeah, and I don't think that ever goes away, like the comparison and that sort of thing. Like I'll admit to both ends of the scale, comparing myself to other people and like putting on a fake persona at times on social media. I'm probably as guilty as anyone else. But like I can go through my Instagram and look at you, for example, and be like, oh, Paul's got a new business, and like he's just written a book, and like he's doing all this cool stuff. So I don't think that ever goes away. Which is kind of scary to think of, like, what are the next generation going to be like? But anyway, you mentioned, I was going to ask you what should we be focusing on in our 20s, but you touched on that self-awareness, and I totally agree. In fact, like Gary Vaynerchuk as well, and I don't agree with like everything he says and does, but his big thing that he preaches is like self-awareness.
Yes.
Now, we both quit our jobs with no real plan B, as you mentioned. I'm interested to find out for you, what was it that finally pushed you kind of over the edge?
Yes. So when I tell this story, many people think that I just quit. And honestly, it wasn't as easy as it sounded like, because it took about 4 years for me to really pull the plug and just dive into the sea of ambiguity after quitting my job. But what it really did for me was a number of things. But I remember having hearing this conversation in my work one day, where all my colleagues, all my team members are baby boomers. They're probably in their mid-50s. I was the only young, mid-20-something there. And I was overhearing a conversation where one of my colleagues were saying, hey, talking to another person, like, oh, how many years do you have left to retire? And they actually were like counting the actual number of years and number of days of how much time they have to retire. And they were saying, oh, that's so awesome. It's so cool. What are you going to do? And they're having all these like talks about, oh, this is what I'm going to do once I retire. And I felt really kind of sad, honestly, because these guys were working for 20, 30 years at this company, and they look completely miserable, completely disengaged from work. And they're just waiting for that time to get retired, and as if that was like paradise. And I thought to myself, wow, like, I don't want to live this life where I'm just kind of going through the daily grind, and I don't want to be that guy who says like, oh, I'm waiting for the time to retire. I believe that life is a gift, and I only have one life, and I want to maximize what I've been given and really use that to serve other people, and not just go through just life and just experience. Like, I want to do something more with that. So I felt this greater urge, greater desire to use what I've been given, the gifts and talents, to really serve people. And I saw that in my role at this Fortune 500 company, I was limited, very limited in that way. So eventually I said to myself, well, the ideal case was this. I was going to look for other job that was aligned with my calling, and I was going to go through an interview with them. And if I got a job offer, then I would quit. So I have some maybe space, a month or two, just to spend for my time, and I can go to that job. But I applied for about 30, 40 jobs. I got a lot of different interviews, even went to final interviews, but I never got it. And I felt really discouraged, very discouraged at that point, because I thought, like, maybe nobody will hire me. But I realized that if I continue working at this place, it will be even worse. So I actually ended up just saying, I'm going to quit by this time. I know if I just keep thinking about it, I'm just going to postpone and not make any action. So I did. I put a timeline. I reached that time, and I submitted my resignation letter to my manager, and that's when I quit. And here's the crazy thing. About 4 days into quitting my job, I get a Facebook message from this guy who I never knew. Like, we were in this same Facebook group, but he out of nowhere calls me and says, Paul, like, you probably don't know me. We're connected on Facebook, but I was really intrigued by your story, and actually I was praying to God yesterday, and your name was highlighted in this prayer, and I didn't know what it meant. So I just wanted to call you and see just who you are and listen to your story. And I just felt it was a very interesting time, right? Like, out of nowhere, why does this person call me? And I believe there's no coincidences. And I just believe that everything happens for a reason, and had this amazing conversation over an hour. And basically, he shared the company that he was working for, which is a leadership development consulting firm. And as soon as I heard the vision statement of this company, I was literally getting goosebumps, because this is the vision that God's been giving me. And I just felt like, wow, like, I have no idea there was an organization that had a vision like this. So long story short, he introduced me to some of his other colleagues, and then the CEO of the company. And in a matter of few days, I had all these conversations over the phone, and they offered me a job offer. And I'm like kind of blown away at this point, because that was nothing in my plan. But I realized that this was happening for a purpose, for a reason. And then I accepted it, and then I was able to work for them for about 2 years, which has been one of the best learning opportunities in my life.
Yeah, it's so funny, because I totally agree with no such thing as coincidences. And in the talk that I gave on Monday to my high school, I said that if all you're focused on is like your goals and your vision, you're going to miss the opportunities that pop up that you could never have imagined before. And so right. you said, like, you analyzed all the opportunities, and like you applied for jobs and nothing happened, but you just put yourself out there and like you took action, and then the things started happening, which is amazing. Like, I really enjoyed that. And for people listening, if they're in a similar situation, what is your advice now looking back? Do you recommend people just quit? Do they start like a side gig while they're still employed? What do you recommend people do if they're feeling unfulfilled at work?
Yes. Side gigs are always a great way to start, especially if there's something you're passionate about. Obviously, I don't recommend just quitting your job altogether if you don't have a really solid plan. I think for me, how I was able to have the courage to actually even quitting was because I started with a side gig, and that was blogging for me. I started blogging about 6 years ago, and it started really as a hobby, but it turned into a serious initiative and endeavor where I started interacting with other seasoned bloggers who's been doing this way more years than I was, and they really helped me to really build my platform. And I started to just write, and I started to really enjoy the process of writing and reading all these great leadership books and applying them in my life and being able to share that with not just to myself, but other people too. It really was huge. And one of the things that happened as things were picking up with the blog, I get an email from this guy who basically asked me, Paul, like I love your stuff, and I was wondering if you also provide coaching service. And at that point, honestly, I didn't even know what a coach does. But I'm like, oh, yes, I do. I provide coaching. And I'm like, and at that point, I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm getting into, but I just know that if there's somebody who saw something there, then I believe that I have that skill set, right? It's kind of interesting feeling. Mm-hmm. But basically, out of that, I started to really get into coaching and learn more about coaching and actually start coaching people where I was getting some side income through that. And I realized, wow, like this is such a fulfilling thing. This is such a thing that I really enjoy. And I was able to start even my new business because of the fact that these side gigs, small side gigs accumulating over time, that has given me a glimpse of a vision of what it could look like if I ended up quitting this job and pursuing something different altogether.
Yeah, I got goosebumps and a huge smile on my face as you were saying that. And you mentioned how the side gigs have grown, and I want to kind of fast forward to today. And at the time of recording, as we said earlier, your book is about to launch tomorrow, The Quarter Life Calling. And you've just recently sort of launched another resource for people in their 20s called Cara. So let's start with Cara. Tell us a bit about what it is and why you decided to pivot from, the previous Boeing and the leadership consulting stuff you were doing to focus now on 20-somethings.
Yeah, for sure. So for Cara, it's a Hebrew word for the word calling. So the entire idea, the big why behind Cara as an organization is to really empower 20-somethings to find their true north, is to find their big why in life. And that's exactly why I started this, because of my story of going through a quarter life crisis and trying to look for resources for people in their 20s that could have helped me around all these different questions that I was having. But unfortunately, as I had been reading every single book and looking for all these organizations, I couldn't really come across a lot of resources on helping me navigate this quarter life crisis, which is so real for many of us, that I said to myself, if there's something I could do, I would love to reach this huge demographic who's wrestling with these big questions in life. So it started with a book. And as it started with the book, I got a ton of good responses. And then I said to myself, this is more than a book. This is not just a one book deal where I just write a book and share that. It's a great start, but I have to do something more. So that's how the Cara organization really started a couple months ago. And for me to be able to pivot from what I was doing, which is leadership development consulting work, which is something I generally enjoyed. I think also part of it too is how Quarter Life Calling, I didn't have a lot of expectations when I launched this book, because I self-published it and I knew I was in the long game. I want to write 30 books in my lifetime, and this is just my first book. So I honestly said to myself, well, this book will help me get to the next book. And that was really kind of the expectation I had. But a lot of people started picking up this book, and a publisher picked it up, and now it's getting republished. The book's also getting translated into Korean, into Polish, and all these opportunities started to open up. And it's not something that I honestly did to really open this opportunity. It just opened up, and I really believe that's something God allowed that to happen for a purpose. And I just felt that this is something that I have to really reconsider, because this is happening for a reason again, no coincidences. So I really believe that I have to do something. And so I believe this is an assignment that I've been given to work on building this organization, maybe 5 years or maybe 10 years, who knows? But being able to do this as a season and steward that, for me, I think is a big assignment.
Yeah, and I think there's a really valuable lesson in what you just shared, and that is that you were kind of treating the Quarter Life Calling as, you know, like level one, it was the first project, and you didn't try and make it perfect, although I'm sure it's really valuable nonetheless. But it was like a stepping stone to writing even better books in the future. Whereas if you'd got caught up like this needs to be the book, you might never have written it. And
Exactly.
I think there's a really big lesson in that. And I mean, look how it's picked up now. It's amazing. You mentioned how you pivoted from the other things to the 20-something focus now. How, if people are listening to this, how can they tell if it's time to kind of pivot directions a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think, studies show that their average 20-something will go through 7 different jobs just in their 20s. And what I would say to a 20-something who is currently in a job where they're probably not engaged, not fully living in their sweet spot, it's okay to be in that season, because probably you're not going to be there for the next 20 years. You're going to be looking for opportunities. And I think a lot of times in our 20s, we look for that one dream job that's going to give us so much enjoyment and fulfillment. But that's probably not going to come as fast as you think, just because it takes time to build our skill sets. It takes time for us to really understand really what I want. I think that's also a big part of that in our 20s is exploration, experimentation. And we all need that part of it to really know what that looks like. So pivoting is a very natural thing. And especially when you look at your gift sets, your passions, your personality, and your life story, which I call the vocational sweet spot. If you're able to think through those different areas and find what is the intersection of those things, where if there's a job that I could literally incorporate those 4 different elements into my job, that is going to be a place where you're going to fully truly feel alive and feel like you're living your purpose. So that might take some time. It may take some time, maybe there's a few years, or it may take over 10 years. But if you're on the right direction, that's what I think is most important, because if you're on the right direction, you're going to get to your destination. But a lot of times people just want it so fast that they easily give up. They don't persevere. And rightfully so. That's why a lot of millennials have been given a bad press, and they're known as very entitled or lazy people. Not everyone's like that, but there's definitely the trophy generation that we grew up as in the States contributed that in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we mentioned the book and the vocational sweet spot, which I'm sure is a big part of it, and finding your quarter life calling. What else can people learn in the book that might be worth mentioning here?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is really thinking through how does your work matter, because I think work is a big part of our lives. In fact, we spend 60 to 70% of our waking hours working. A lot of people feel like work is a necessary evil. Work is something where I just work because for the weekend or for the holidays, and they don't really see work as a way to impact people or using their work to really do a service to others. So for me, I think working is, for me, a way to really glorify my creator and my God by becoming the best that I was called to be. So I think it's really important to have that mindset that whatever work you're engaged in, you're doing that to really impact people and to serve people, not just to climb the corporate ladder, not just to make a name for yourself. I think there's something inherently bigger than that when you talk about work.
Yeah, I love that. Paul, anything valuable we think, we didn't mention that you think might be worthwhile for people to hear in this interview?
Well, I think, if you're in your 20s and if you are currently stuck, if you are feeling like you don't know where you're going, I just want to tell you that it's okay. Like, it's okay where you are. Um, the world is going to tell you that you need to get your act together. You need to do all these things, and they're going to throw you with all these curveballs. But really, it's part of the process of growing up, of experiencing these feelings, why you're feeling this way, exploring and experimenting all of these anxieties is part of life. I'm not saying that you just want to stay there. Obviously, you want to do something about it, but also realizing that this is part of life and it's okay to experience this. So I truly believe that your quarter life crisis is not just really a stage to pass over. It is a transition to embrace. It is the perfect time to confront your fears. It is a time to really realize that I have specific gifts. I have specific passions that I can bring to the table. So that's really what I would like to encourage any one of you who are listening, that everybody goes through some sort of a transition, some sort of a process like this. And if you're going to go through it, you might as well enjoy the process.
I love it. Paul, I do have some final questions here before we wrap up. So just the first thing that comes to mind is perfect. The first one is, what do you wish you'd been told in your 20s?
Take it slow. Take it slow. Life doesn't end in your 20s. I was so impatient. I was so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that my entire life was so career driven. And as a result, I missed out on a lot of opportunities to just build meaningful relationships with people outside the workplace context. So having that holistic view of life, where career for me at the time was the whole thing. Maybe I would go and tell myself, to the younger 20-something Paul, to say that there's a lot more life than just to your career.
What is the greatest opportunity for quarter lifers today?
Greatest opportunities, I'll say this again, self-awareness. Take time to discover who you really are. This is the best time to explore how you were created. And instead of trying to become the next Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, I say try to become the best version that you were created to be. And when you're in that spot, you're going to show up differently. You're going to be fully alive.
Paul, I do have one more question before we get to that. Where can people go to get in touch with you and find out more about Cara and the Quarter Life Calling and everything else you've got going on?
Yeah, so if you want to visit Cara, it's cara.org, QARA.org. Also, my book is available nationwide in United States and Canada, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. So feel free to go and get a copy if you are a 20-something, or if you know a 20-something who is also wrestling with this. It's also graduation time for seniors as well, so it's a great gift. But if you just want to contact me or just reach out to me too, feel free to do that on Facebook or Instagram. I'm pretty open, so I'm more than happy to connect with you guys.
I love it. Paul, before I get to the final question, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you for coming on today and sharing your story. But even more than that, turning your own quarter life crisis into something so much bigger and now helping other people kind of find their true north as well. I think it's really cool work that you've got going on, and I love how you're showing up. And I'm sure this is going to be the start of a really cool relationship between us. And I just wanted to thank you again. And the final question that I have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback or quarter life calling?
Yeah, that's great. One thing is, that's a great question. There's so many different things you can do. But I think one thing you could do is start asking for feedback. And feedback could sound like a very dirty term because nobody likes the word feedback, but feedback is basically how you show up. And you start asking questions like, what do you think makes me unique? And even that one question, asking your family and friends and your colleagues, your peers, and getting their response I think would be an amazing start for you to start discovering who you really, really are. And that's going to help you with so many different things in realizing your calling in life. So that's my number one tip.
I love it. Paul Sohn, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate it.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up episode 58 of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast. And a big thanks to Paul once again for coming on and sharing so much with us today. I really enjoyed this interview. I've been wanting to get Paul on here for quite a while. And I actually can't believe he's still so young and he's doing so much. It's really cool. If you found this valuable and you think your friends will too, please share it around on social media and shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier to let me know your biggest takeaway. For me, it was the vocational sweet spot that Paul mentioned. And, finding the intersection of those 4 areas that we spoke about. And I'll put a graphic of that up on my Instagram profile, which you guys can find at Brian Tier on Instagram. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/058. And make sure you subscribe at quarterlifecomeback.com to get more info and episodes like this as soon as they come out. Thanks once again for joining me this week, and until next time, keep creating your Quarter Life Comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.